The text came in at 10:14 a.m. on Christmas Eve. Hey, sweetheart, just wanted to let you know we're canceling Christmas dinner. The ice storm is getting worse and everyone is staying home. Stay safe. Love you. I stared at my phone, disappointment settling deep in my chest. I should have expected this. Winter in Nashville could be unpredictable, and an ice storm made sense. It just sucked. I had been looking forward to seeing everyone, even though, if I was being honest, family gatherings always left me feeling like an outsider. I sighed, setting my phone down. Well, there was nothing I could do. I wasn't about to risk driving on icy roads just for the sake of holiday cheer. Instead, I made myself some hot chocolate, curled up on the couch, and tried to enjoy a quiet Christmas by myself. Then, around 3 p.m., I made a mistake. I opened Instagram. The first post that popped up stopped me cold. Perfect Christmas at Lila's. So grateful for family traditions. My cousin, Theo, had posted a photo. And there they all were. My mom, my dad, my sister, Lila, aunts, uncles, cousins, even my grandmother. They were gathered around Lila's beautifully decorated dining table, smiling in their matching Christmas sweaters. Plates of turkey and stuffing filled the table, twinkling lights glowing softly in the background. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I scrolled, my fingers shaking. More pictures, more smiles, more evidence that Christmas dinner wasn't canceled at all. The ice storm that had supposedly stranded everyone at home? Nowhere to be seen. Through the window in the background of the photos, the sky was clear and blue. They had lied to me. Not just forgotten me. Not miscommunicated. They had deliberately excluded me. And for what? Because I didn't fit into their picture-perfect holiday? Because I wasn't Lila the golden child, the favorite, the one who had never had to try for their love? My hands clenched into fists as realization hit me like a truck. How many times had this happened before? How many times had I been told plans were canceled, only to find out later that they had gone on without me? All those last-minute change of plans, the invitations that never came, had they all been lies? I didn't cry. I didn't even feel sad. I just felt done. The next morning, my phone rang. Mom. I let it ring twice before answering. Hey, Mom. Hi, honey. Hope you had a nice, quiet Christmas. We missed you. Her words sent a fresh wave of anger surging through me. We missed you. They had spent the night celebrating together while I sat alone in my apartment, drinking cocoa and believing their lie. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. Really? That's funny because Theo's Instagram says otherwise. Silence, a beat too long. Then a forced chuckle. Oh, well, Lila put everything together last minute. We just assumed you'd rather stay home. You know how you are at these things, so quiet. It can make people uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. All those times you told me plans fell through, I said, my voice eerily calm. How many of those were lies, Mom? Another silence. Then a sigh. Cammy, you're overreacting. We just thought, you thought I wouldn't notice? I snapped. You thought I'd just accept it? That I'd sit here, alone, believing your lies, while you all had the perfect Christmas without me? Her tone hardened. You're being dramatic. Lila just wanted everything to be perfect. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Right. And I would have ruined that, huh? Cammy, you work so much. You never make time for family. I nearly threw my phone across the room. I work because I have to. Unlike Lila, I don't have you and Dad funding my life. I wasn't the one who dropped out of school and got handed a business. I wasn't the one who got bailed out every time. I made a mistake. I was the one who helped you pay off your mortgage. I was the one who took care of Dad when he had surgery. I was the one who did everything right. And it still wasn't enough for you. Mom's voice turned cold. If you're going to be like this, maybe it's best we take some space. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, a strange sense of calm settling over me. This wasn't new. The rejection, the dismissal, the way they made me feel like the problem, even when they were the ones hurting me. But this time I wasn't going to ignore it. I wasn't going to let them brush me aside and pretend everything was fine. No, this time they were going to see exactly what they had done. I turned on my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I composed an email to my entire family. I saw the photos from Christmas dinner, the one I was told was canceled due to an ice storm. I just want you all to know exactly what you've done. You didn't forget to invite me. You didn't miscommunicate. You lied. You made a choice to exclude me, and I want you to live with that choice. I attached screenshots, the text from my mom, the Instagram posts, the clear, sunny weather, and then, without hesitation, I hit send. Almost immediately, the responses started pouring in. Oh, we just forgot to update you. You're blowing this out of proportion. This is why we didn't invite you, Cammy. You always make everything about you. Then came Lila's message. I just wanted one perfect holiday. You never make an effort anyway. Maybe it was better this way. I sat back, heart pounding, as the realization solidified. They weren't sorry. They weren't even trying to be. And for the first time in my life, I saw them for who they really were. And I was done. After I sent the email, I sat back and waited. The responses didn't take long. My inbox filled up almost immediately with defensive messages, excuses, and outright gaslighting. Cammy, we thought you'd be too busy with work. This was just a misunderstanding. Don't blow it out of proportion. You're being really unfair. It was a last-minute thing. Last minute? The decorations, the catered-looking spread, the perfectly coordinated outfits and their pictures. They had been planning this for weeks. Then came the message from my dad. It was short, direct, and stung more than the rest. Enough of this nonsense. You're embarrassing yourself. Apologize to your mother. Apologize. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a deep breath, locked my phone, and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't just about Christmas anymore. This was years of built-up resentment, years of being sidelined, brushed off, and treated like an outsider in my own family. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that they had excluded me, or the fact that they genuinely didn't think they had done anything wrong. I wasn't going to let this go. The next morning, I woke up to a dozen missed calls from my mom and sister. More texts flooded in. Then my best friend Lauren called. Dude, have you checked Facebook? She asked, her voice tense. My stomach twisted. No, why? Your mom posted some long, dramatic status about how family is about forgivenesses and how some people choose to push loved ones away with their negativity. It's super passive-aggressive, I groaned. Of course she did. I opened Facebook, and sure enough, there it was. The holidays are a time for love and unity, but sadly, not everyone chooses to embrace family. We try to include everyone, but sometimes people refuse to see what's right in front of them. All we can do is pray for their healing. The comments were filled with support. You're such a wonderful mother. Family can be tough, but you have such a big heart. Some people don't know how lucky they are. I clenched my jaw. This wasn't just manipulation. This was a calculated move to make me look like the bad guy, while they played the innocent victims. Then came the text from my sister, Lila. Mom's really upset. You know how she is, just let this go. You're being ridiculous. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Let it go? Like I had let it go every other time? No, not this time. I picked up my phone and typed a response. You're right, Lila. I do know how she is. That's why I'm done pretending. Enjoy your perfect family. I'm out. And with that, I blocked her. Blocked my mom. Blocked my dad. Then I turned my phone off, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The silence lasted exactly 48 hours. At first, it was blissful. No guilt-tripping texts. No passive-aggressive calls. No dramatic Facebook posts clogging my feed. I almost started to believe they would finally leave me alone. But, of course, that was wishful thinking. On the third day, I was in my apartment, making coffee, when a loud knock rattled my front door. I already knew who it was before I even checked. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and pulled it open. There she stood, my mother, wrapped in her expensive coat, her expression a carefully rehearsed mix of hurt and disappointment. Behind her, my father loomed, arms crossed, his face set in a permanent scowl. Cammy, my mom began, letting out a dramatic sigh. This has gone far enough. I leaned against the doorframe. Has it? She placed a hand over her chest like I had just struck her. We didn't come here to argue. We came because we love you, I scoffed. Love me? You mean the way you love me on Christmas? Dad exhaled sharply. We're not doing this. You embarrassed your mother. You embarrassed this family. I laughed, shaking my head. Oh, I'm sorry. Did my embarrassment interrupt your perfect little holiday? Must have been so hard for you. Mom clenched her jaw. We told you we thought you wouldn't want to come. You're always so. She trailed off, searching for the right word. I gave her an unimpressed look. Go ahead, say it. So difficult, so uptight, so awkward. She let out another sigh. Why are you making yourself the victim? I blinked. Making myself the victim? You lied to me. You excluded me. Then you had the audacity to play the innocent party online. What part of that sounds like I'm the problem? Dad pinched the bridge of his nose. Cammy, you're overreacting. You've always been sensitive. This is just how families are. I shook my head, stepping back. No, Dad. This is how our family is. And I'm done with it. Mom's expression turned desperate. You don't mean that. I do. I exhaled, gripping the doorframe to steady myself. I mean every word. For the first time in my life, I saw the panic in her eyes. She had always assumed I'd come back, that I'd swallow my pride and let them sweep everything under the rug like I always did. But this time, I wasn't playing along. We can fix this, she insisted. You just need to apologize. I let out a sharp laugh. Apologize? For what? For calling out your lies? For finally standing up for myself? No, Mom, that's not happening. Dad stepped forward, his voice dangerously low. You really want to do this? You want to burn this bridge? I met his gaze, unwavering. You already burned it. A heavy silence settled between us. I could see the anger building in my dad's eyes, the frustration radiating off my mom. Finally, Mom let out a small, shaky breath. You're going to regret this. I tilted my head. No, Mom, you are. And with that, I shut the door in their faces. I expected to feel guilty, but I didn't. For the first time in my life, I felt free. But something told me they weren't done yet. And I was right. Because what happened next changed everything. I barely had time to process shutting the door on my parents before my phone started blowing up again. First, it was my cousin Theo. Dude, what is going on? Your parents are freaking out. Then a text from my aunt, Cammy, you need to fix this. Your mother is heartbroken. I rolled my eyes. She wasn't heartbroken, she was losing control. And that was something my mom had never handled well. Then came the real bombshell. A message from Rachel, an old family friend. Cammy, I know this is random, but can we talk? There's something you need to know about your family. It's important. That sent a chill through me. Rachel had been around my parents for years. She had managed their finances before she retired. If she was reaching out now, it had to be serious. We met later that evening at a quiet coffee shop. She looked nervous, clutching a manila envelope like it was the weight of the world. I saw what happened on Facebook, she admitted, and I can't stay silent anymore. My stomach twisted. Stay silent about what? She slid the envelope across the table. Your grandfather left you something. A lot of something, and your parents never told you. I opened the envelope and pulled out the documents. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. But as I flipped through the bank statements and legal forms, realization dawned. My grandfather, who had always been one of the only people in my family who saw me, had left me a substantial inheritance. Nearly $300,000, and I had never seen a dime of it. Your father was the trustee, Rachel explained. You were supposed to get access when you turned 25. But instead, he funneled the money into Lila's accounts. Used it for her business, her trips, her lifestyle. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. All those years, I had worked myself to exhaustion, struggling to pay off my student loans, skipping vacations because I couldn't afford them while my parents had been sitting on a fortune that was meant for me. There's more, Rachel hesitated. Your grandfather also left property for you and Lila to split. But your parents sold them all. Used a power of attorney they had you sign when you were 18. I gripped the edge of the table. I remembered that document. They had told me it was for emergency medical decisions. That it was for my own good. In reality, they had used it to steal from me. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Rachel looked at me carefully. Cammy, what they did wasn't just immoral. It was illegal. I let out a shaky breath. You're telling me I could take legal action? She nodded. Absolutely. And you should. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the documents in front of me. And then, just like on Christmas Day when I had seen that Instagram post, something inside me snapped. I had spent years giving them the benefit of the doubt, making excuses, letting things go. But this was unforgivable. I met Rachel's gaze, my decision made. Then let's do this. It was time to make them face the consequences. I wasn't impulsive. That's what made this different. This wasn't some emotional outburst or a dramatic declaration I'd regret later. This was a cold, calculated decision. My parents had stolen from me, lied to me, betrayed me in ways I hadn't even imagined. And now, they were going to pay for it. I spent the next week building my case. Rachel helped me go through the bank statements, property records, and legal documents. The numbers didn't lie. Every unauthorized transfer, every stolen asset, it was all right there, in black and white. Then I met with Sarah Chen, a lawyer specializing in estate fraud. She skimmed through the paperwork, nodding as she made notes. This is a solid case, Cammie. You have enough evidence to press criminal charges. At the very least, we can file a civil suit to recover the stolen funds. I exhaled, steadying myself. I want to give them a choice first. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You're giving them a way out after what they did to you? I want to see their faces when they realize I know. I paused, voice firm. Then I want them to understand exactly what happens if they don't make it right. She smirked. I like the way you think. The email I sent to my parents and Lila was simple. We need to talk. My place. Saturday at noon. They agreed almost immediately, probably assuming I was going to apologize or beg for reconciliation. They had no idea what was coming. The morning of the meeting, I arranged 3 identical folders on my coffee table, one for each of them. Each folder contained a full breakdown of my grandfather's inheritance and how it was supposed to be divided. Bank records showing how my father had transferred my money into Lila's accounts. Property records proving that they had sold what was legally mine. A letter from Sarah outlining their legal options. When noon rolled around, they arrived together, looking smug. Mom swept in first, fake warmth in her voice. Cammie, sweetheart, I knew you'd come to your senses. Dad followed, arms crossed, his usual look of quiet authority plastered across his face. Lila trailed behind, glancing around like she couldn't believe she had to be there. I stayed silent, gesturing for them to sit. Once they were settled, I pushed the folders toward them. Before you say anything, read. Mom's brows furrowed. Cammie, what is this? Dad opened his folder first. The second he saw the numbers, his expression dropped. Lila flipped through hers, her face going pale. What is this? I leaned forward. It's proof. Mom's voice wavered. This isn't what it looks like. I tilted my head. Really? Because it looks like Dad stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from me. It looks like he used my inheritance to fund Lila's lifestyle. It looks like you forged my signature to sell property that was mine. Nobody spoke. Dad was gripping the folder so tightly his knuckles turned white. Lila's eyes darted between the documents and Mom. You told me this money was from our savings, that it was for the business. I turned to her, voice flat. You knew. Maybe not all of it, but you knew, she swallowed, looking away. Mom placed a trembling hand on my arm. Cammie, we can fix this. We're family. I pulled away. No, Mom. You don't get to play the family card when it's convenient. I let the silence stretch before I spoke again. You have 2 choices. Dad's jaw clenched. And what would those be? I sat back, arms crossed. Option 1. You return every stolen penny, with interest. You sign a confession admitting what you did. You give me everything I'm owed. Mom's face crumbled. And option 2? I met her eyes. I press charges. I take you to court, and you lose everything. Lila let out a choked breath. You wouldn't. I cut her off. I would, and I will. Dad slammed the folder shut. This is blackmail. I laughed coldly. No, Dad. This is consequences. Silence. I could see the calculations running through his head. Then Mom turned to me, her voice soft. Sweetheart, you don't want to do this. I exhaled sharply, standing up. That's where you're wrong, Mom. I've never wanted to do anything more in my life. They had 48 hours to decide, and I already knew what their answer would be. 48 hours came and went. I didn't expect them to do the right thing. I knew my family too well. They would rather burn everything to the ground than admit they had done something wrong. And that's exactly what they did. Instead of transferring the money or signing the confession, they went into damage control mode. First, they tried to destroy the evidence. I got a notification that my dad had closed multiple bank accounts, probably trying to move money around. Then I heard from Rachel that my parents had been calling old friends, spinning a sob story about how I was attacking them out of nowhere. Lila even sent me a final, desperate text. "Please, don't do this. We can figure this out. You're my sister." I stared at the screen for a long time before deleting the message. She had her whole life handed to her on a silver platter while I struggled. She never once questioned, never even considered that I might deserve better. It was too late now. At exactly noon the next day, I walked into Sarah's office and signed the paperwork to file criminal charges. By that afternoon, the police had search warrants. By the evening, my parents' entire world collapsed. Dad was the first to go. He was arrested at his office, hauled out in cuffs in front of all his coworkers. A high-profile fraud case like his? It made the news within hours. Mom was next. She had been out hosting a charity event, pretending to be the perfect wife and mother when the cops showed up. She had the nerve to sob on camera as they escorted her out. And Lila? The police froze her accounts immediately. Everything she had, her business, her car, her savings, had all been funded by my stolen money. She lost it all overnight. The family group chat? Absolute chaos. Aunt Linda, Cammie, what have you done? Uncle Rob, this is a private family matter. Why would you bring the police into this? Cousin Theo, holy shit, this is insane. I didn't respond. I let the evidence speak for itself. My parents took plea deals. They had no choice. The evidence was airtight. They returned most of the money, but the damage was already done. My dad lost his job, my mom's reputation was in tatters, and Lila had to get a real job for the first time in her life. The perfect family image they had so carefully curated was gone forever. And me? I moved. Far away, Denver, to be exact. I bought a house with my reclaimed inheritance and built a life that had nothing to do with them. Most of my extended family stopped talking to me, but surprisingly, I didn't care. For the first time ever, I was free. One day, months later, I got a message from Rachel. "Your grandfather would have been so proud of you. He always knew you were the strong one." I smiled, looking out at the snow-covered city skyline. I had spent years trying to prove I was worthy of love and acceptance from a family that had never truly valued me. But now I knew the truth. I was never the problem. And that was the greatest gift of all. Story 2. While I was undergoing emergency surgery, my twins' parents refused to take care of them, claiming that since my sister and I got tickets to see Elton John, I was a bother and a burden. So, from the hospital bed, I contacted a babysitter, severed all familial links, and stopped providing them with financial assistance. They arrived after 2 weeks. "You have no right to request that we postpone our plans once more. These Elton John tickets have been with us for months." My mother's voice reverberated across my hospital room as she shouted. I sat there dumbfounded, my hands shaking as I gripped my phone. At Las Vegas Medical Center, it was Christmas Eve. It was only me and my twins, Ethan and Emily, who were all 2 years old, playing peacefully in the corner as Valerie, the nurse, checked my vital signs. My stomach hurt so badly that it seemed like a knife was being twisted inside of me. Even more painful, though, was my mother's expression of apathy during the video conversation. "Natasha Wilson is my name. I'm 33 years old, and I've always been the odd man out in my own family." According to my parents, my younger sister Jessica, the golden child, was incapable of doing anything wrong. While I had emergency surgery 6 months ago for problems connected to my husband's death, I was unable to even convince them to watch their only grandkids. My parents only cared about their concert tickets and spending Christmas Eve with Jessica, even though the doctors had discovered internal bleeding that needed to be treated right away. My dad's remark pierced my heart more deeply than any medical instrument could when I eventually turned to them for assistance after trying every other avenue. Natasha, you're turning into a major annoyance and burden. We are now retired. We are entitled to a life free from your incessant troubles. Since my parents retired early 3 years ago, I have been providing for them financially. I always provided them $2,500 a month to help with their expenditures and mortgage. I did it out of obligation and love, even after James passed away, since I think families should help one another. How stupid I was. My tears dropped on the hospital blanket without a sound. Valerie gave my shoulder a little squeeze. A professional nanny with a focus on childhood trauma is my buddy Olivia. I'll give her a call. In sharp contrast to my parents' coldness, she gave her kindness. The twins were too small to comprehend the situation. Their father had previously died in an automobile accident. Now, if the procedure doesn't work, they could lose me too. I was afraid of the idea, but not as much as I was of leaving them with somebody who thought they were a burden. I made my choice at that very time, while my body ached and my heart was broken by disappointment. Indeed. Give her a call, please. After telling Valerie, the first started severing my toxic connections with those who had reared me, but had never shown me true love. A flood of memories swept over me as I hung up. There had been several times during my youth when I was ignored. While Jessica got all the attention, Jessica was cast in a local commercial that same weekend, so my parents hardly noticed when I graduated with honors from college. They grumbled that the wedding location was too distant from their house when I married James. They only came once, even after the twins were delivered, since they said the babies were too fussy for them. Through it all, James had been my pillar of support. Having spent years apart from his own father, he was aware of the anguish of family disappointment. He would remark, "We'll start our own family, someone who understands how to love." And we did, establishing a cozy, accepting, and humorous household. However, a drunk driver took him away 6 months ago, leaving me to raise our kids by myself while dealing with loss and sadness. I kept helping my parents in spite of my loss. When they said they were having trouble keeping up with inflation, I even raised the monthly amount. I wanted to surpass them in order to demonstrate that families should always support one another. The irony was heartbreaking. Here I was, inwardly bleeding. They couldn't miss a single performance to take care of my kids, even if they could be dying. When Valerie got back, she told them that her friend Olivia will be there in an hour. Valerie informed me that she's fantastic with children. Prior to becoming a private nanny, she worked in the children's hospital with traumatized children. What is the price of this? With a hint of concern in my voice, I questioned. James's insurance coverage had restrictions, so medical expenditures were already mounting. Valerie responded, "Don't worry about that now. Let's concentrate on preparing you for surgery." However, I was concerned. I considered the $2,500 I was supposed to give my folks the next week. Instead, the money might be used to assist pay for childcare. Something ignited inside me at the concept. A self-preservation fire that had been smothered years before. Olivia was pleasant, professional, and instantly bonded with the twins when she came, just as Valerie had promised. As medical personnel readied me for operation, I decided, "Would you please bring my phone again?" My hands were trembling as I asked Valerie. I sent 2 mails. First, I canceled any upcoming automatic transfers to my parents' account with my bank. To my parents, the second. Financial support will no longer be provided by me. I deserve better than to be your afterthought, as do my kids. Never get in touch with me again. Through the pain and worry, I experienced something unexpected as they rolled me toward the surgery room. Liberty. Although the operation went well, I was left feeling weaker than I had expected. I was in and out of consciousness for 5 days in the hospital. I'm thankful to Olivia for going above and beyond by taking the twins to my apartment at night and remaining with them in my hospital room throughout the day. When I had a flashback, I saw my phone glowing with alerts, 27 missed calls, and a ton of text messages from Jessica and my parents. The majority of the communications had a recurring pattern: bewilderment, rage, and then frantic requests regarding their mortgage payment. They never inquired about the twins' well-being or the outcome of my procedure. My father's last message was quite poignant. "You cannot simply cut us off in this manner. The tickets for the cruise we have scheduled for next month are non-refundable." The communications from my sister were different. She appeared to be truly perplexed. Your parents recently informed me that you were undergoing a minor operation. What's happening? Why is money making them so anxious? I realized that my parents had misled Jessica about how bad things were for me. To defend their concert selection over their grandchildren, I made the decision to be honest with her. Still drowsy from the drugs, I sent her the whole story. She answered right away, "God, Natasha!" I was unaware that the surgery was an emergency. I was informed that you were exaggerating the importance of a simple checkup. If I had known, I would have kept an eye on the twins. I'm so sorry. I trusted her. Jessica wasn't mean. She had just been brought up in a setting that prioritized her needs. She might be able to perceive our parents more clearly as a result of this realization. I had made a number of choices by the time I was released. In order to assist with the twins while I recovered, I first employed Olivia on a part-time basis. Second, I contacted a lawyer to draft a will designating a trusted friend as the twins' guardian should anything happen to me. Certainly not my folks. Third, I banned my parents' numbers, giving only Jessica minimal communication as I analyzed her sincerity. The financial repercussions of my decision were enormous. The $2,500 monthly payment I'd been giving to my parents constituted about a third of my salary as a graphic designer. Without that burden, I could really afford good childcare and maybe even start rebuilding the emergency fund that had been drained following James's death. That night, as I lay in my own bed with the twins asleep in their room across the hall, I felt a confusing combination of feelings. There was remorse, the entrenched conviction that I was somehow bad for putting myself and my children first. There was worry about managing rehabilitation while caring for 2 kids. But there was also an unusual sense of self-respect taking root. Jessica texted me, then my phone rang. I just got into a heated argument with my parents over how they handled you. Tonight, I'm staying at a hotel. Can we discuss this tomorrow? Perhaps I wasn't so alone after all. I was gradually becoming stronger 2 weeks after my operation. I was getting better every day, but the incision site still hurt when I moved too fast. Olivia, who came every morning to help with the twins while I worked from home, had been a blessing. I was thankful that I could work remotely and yet be near my kids, and my graphic design clients had been surprisingly patient about my restricted availability. Jessica had been twice to spend time with the twins and deliver nutritious food. After a period of careful discourse, she finally shared her own experiences with our parents. She acknowledged that they always gave the impression that you were choosing to cut ties with the family. We were watching the twins play one evening. They were pushing you away, but I didn't recognize it. After years of our parents' manipulation, I was starting to see a different side of my sister. I valued her efforts even if I wasn't yet ready to fully trust her. Then the door was knocked on, via the crowds I had been partly expecting. In the corridor, I noticed my folks standing. My father stood with his arms folded, while my mother clutched her expensive handbag anxiously. His face was marked with familiar irritation. With my heart racing, I paused before unlocking the door. Just enough to communicate over the distance. "What are you looking for?" My voice was more steady than I had anticipated when I asked. "We have been quite concerned, Natasha, sweetheart." My defenses went up instantly when my mother started speaking in such a sweet voice. "We wanted to make sure you and the twins were okay, because you haven't been returning our calls." "We're all right," I said bluntly. "It's not everything, though, if that's all." My dad pushed a little against the door and interrupted. "We must talk about this absurd financial predicament. We had to take money out of our savings to pay the bank when they contacted regarding our mortgage payment. It was breathtakingly audacious. No inquiries on my recuperation. They don't care for their grandkids. Only financial demands. I'm severing financial links, as I already stated." I meant it. "But, dear," my mom begged. She raised an octave in her voice. "That money has become essential to us. Your promise to assist us caused your father and I to change our way of life." "My promise?" "Incredulous," I echoed. "I've been sending money because I feel obligated and guilty. During my urgent operation, you were unable to even monitor your grandkids." My dad's expression hardened. "Natasha, that is unfair. We were planning. Plans? More crucial than the security of my kids." "Angry," I said. "More important than my life. Have you heard the doctor's words? I might not have made it through the procedure. Have you asked it all? Their silence was sufficient response. My mother said in a dramatic whisper, "We made one mistake. Will you truly punish us in this manner?" "Mom, this isn't punishment. This is the result," I said as an odd serenity took hold of me. "I've been looking for your support and acceptance my entire life. And when I was most in need, you decided to buy me tickets to see Elton John rather than your parents." My father interrupted, his voice changing to one of defiance. I retorted, "And I'm a parent too. The way you've treated me is not how I would ever treat Ethan and Emily. Never." Emily, holding her plush giraffe, came into view at that very moment. My mother changed her strategy right away. "That's my darling grandchild," she was able to bend. Grandma gave gifts. Unaccustomed to these relative strangers, Emily retreated and gave me a doubtful glance. "You ought to go, in my opinion." Silently, I said, "If and when I'm ready to chat, I'll get in touch. But you don't care about the money." My father began anymore. Finally, I closed the door softly. My folks came back with reinforcements the following morning. My mother's sister, my Aunt Patty, had always positioned herself as the mediator in the family. Natasha. "Let's be sensible, honey." I hadn't opened my door when Aunt Patty begged from outside. "Without your assistance, your parents are having difficulties." I answered through the door that they had been handling their finances for decades before I began to assist them. Knowing they didn't have enough money, they decided to retire early. The voice of my mother interrupted, "You promised to assist us, so we made those choices. We may lose the property as a result of having to postpone our trip." Now that I had separated myself from the haze of guilt they had surrounded me with for years, their attempts at manipulation were so obvious. I had promised lifetime support. At what point? After their retirement, I had offered to assist temporarily, but for some reason, that had turned into a long-term agreement. I'm recuperating from a major surgery and taking care of 2 toddlers, Mom and Dad. We're done talking. I ignored their persistent knocking and begging and said that firmly before leaving the door. My father sent out a group email to the entire extended family later that day, explaining how I had deserted them in their hour of need after they had given up everything for me. Conveniently, the email left out their refusal to assist with the twins during my emergency surgery, portraying me as an unappreciative daughter who abruptly and unjustifiably cut them off. The backlash was something they hadn't expected. The group received a response from my cousin Michael, who lives close to my parents. "You just bought a new boat last month, Uncle Robert. Diana, an aunt? You were showing off a brand new diamond tennis bracelet at Thanksgiving, right?" I received private messages from other family members who wanted to know the whole story. When Aunt Patty found out, she even gave me a call. "I didn't know about your surgery," she said. "They told me that you were simply using a routine procedure to punish them financially and being dramatic about it." Jessica, meanwhile, had completely sided with me after seeing our parents' actions up close. She assisted me in creating a succinct, factual response to the family email thread, which read, "I recently had emergency surgery with a significant risk of a cousin Michael's wife dropping off home-cooked meals." I barely knew a second cousin who volunteered to work as a free part-time babysitter. As she helped me recover, Jessica began spending weekends at my apartment and got to know her niece and nephew. Most unexpectedly, the hospital's Valerie put me in touch with a young, widowed parent support group. Zoom was used for their first meeting so I could attend from home. And for the first time since James's passing, I felt like those who had been in my shoes really understood me. Meanwhile, my parents' financial condition rapidly worsened. In fact, they had been living above their means and relied on my monthly contributions to support their lavish spending and travel. Jessica learned that they had purchased their boat a year prior by taking out a second mortgage on their home, assuming that I would keep paying off their primary mortgage forever. After assisting them in reviewing their finances at their request, Jessica was shocked to hear that they had been lying to everyone. They are not impoverished. They're just overspent. They'd be fine if they sold the boat and vacation timeshare. Their increasingly desperate voicemails and texts continued. But with each passing day, their hold on me weakened. I was building something new from the ashes of their betrayal, a genuine support network based on mutual care rather than obligation. 1 month after my surgery, a major unexpected twist occurred. My parents received a foreclosure notice. Jessica called to inform me, her voice a mix of concern and exasperation. They're in complete panic mode, she explained. The bank is giving them 60 days to catch up on payments, or they'll lose the house. What about their retirement funds? I asked, bouncing Emily on my knee while Ethan napped. Mostly depleted. They spent a chunk on that boat, then invested the rest in some scheme Dad's golf buddy recommended. They lost almost everything. Jessica sighed. I'm not saying you should help them, Natasha. I just thought you should know. Later that evening, I received desperate texts from both parents, now abandoning all pretense of concern for my well-being and openly begging for money. My mother's message was particularly revealing. We never thought you'd actually cut us off. We assumed you were just angry and would start sending money again after a week or two. Their assumption that my boundaries weren't real infuriated me. All those years of putting their needs before mine, of accepting their mistreatment, they had never respected me at all. Meanwhile, my own life was transforming in unexpected ways. The support group had become a lifeline, connecting me with other parents facing similar challenges. Through them, I met Diana, a real estate agent whose husband had died of cancer 2 years earlier, leaving her with a 3-year-old son. She helped me consider options I hadn't thought possible, like selling my too small apartment and using the equity to move to a more affordable neighborhood with better childcare options. I'd also started a small side business designing memorial websites inspired by the one I'd created for James. Several members of my support group had commissioned sites, and word was spreading. For the first time since becoming a widow, I felt the sense of purpose beyond mere survival. The contrast between my growth and my parents' collapse became even more apparent when they showed up unannounced at my apartment again, this time with a detailed spreadsheet of their debts. We need $14,000 to catch up on the mortgage and avoid foreclosure, my father explained, his usual authoritative tone now tinged with desperation. I invited them in, not out of obligation, but because I was curious to hear their perspective, now that they were truly facing consequences. What about selling the boat? I asked, gesturing for them to sit at my small dining table. We'd take a loss, my father protested. And the timeshare? We've tried, but the market is terrible, my mother added quickly. Besides, those are our retirement luxuries. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Luxuries you can't afford. We could afford them with your help, my father answered, his tone tightening. It's the least you could do. After everything we've done for you, what precisely have you done for me? I inquired gently, the question lingering in the air like a challenge. The twins selected that time to toddle into the room, Ethan clutching his beloved vehicle and Emily chatting cheerfully. My parents' expression relaxed quickly. There are our darling infants, my mother cooed, grabbing for Emily, who instantly hid beneath my knees. They don't know you, I stated plainly. You've seen them. What, 3 times in their lives? You choose not to be involved. That's not fair, my dad objected. We're all quite busy. Your only grandkids are too busy. Too busy to assist with your daughter's urgent operation. Not too busy, though, to request money, I watched. That, in my opinion, sums up your priorities well. My mom's face fell apart. Whether by intentional deception or sincere feeling, I was no longer able to tell. We'll lose everything without your help, she muttered. My spouse passed away. My voice was firm as I answered. The father of my children passed away. We made it through. You'll make it through. I had surgery 2 or 3 months ago. My parents had to deal with the consequences. In order to save their home from going into foreclosure, they had to sell it. Although I kept my distance, Jessica kept me informed about their circumstances. They had been able to downsize from their 4,000 square foot lakeside house to a small condo. They eventually unloaded the timeshare for a small portion of what they had spent after my father grudgingly sold his yacht at a loss. In reality, they are publicly blaming you for their financial difficulties. During one of her weekly visits, Jessica told me, it's strange to observe. They claim that you leave them after pledging to support them for the rest of their lives. Let them speak, I answered, strangely unconcerned. The truth is self-evident, and it did. After hearing the whole tale, my extended family had mostly come together in support of me. After learning of their unwillingness to assist during my operation, even my father's sister, who had always sided with him in family conflicts, contacted to offer her support. My personal circumstances, meantime, had significantly improved. For my support group, Diana had assisted me in locating and acquiring a modest 3-bedroom home in an area that was suitable for families. For the first time in their lives, the twins had a backyard to play in, and the mortgage payments were actually lower than the rent from my apartment. I was able to cut back on my graphic design clients and concentrate on work that felt purposeful since my side gig of creating memorial websites had expanded sufficiently. I changed my schedule to spend more time with Ethan and Emily, but Olivia continued to assist with daycare 3 days a week. Above all, I had discovered a community. When we moved in, our neighbors brought casseroles. They arranged playdates through the support group. Jessica was no longer a rival for a parent's love, but a true sister. Sometimes even hospital employee Valerie would drop by with her kids. I had severed my relationship with my parents and lost my marriage. But in a way, I felt less isolated than before. I got a letter 6 months after my operation. My mother's original handwritten letter. I nearly tossed it away without opening it. However, curiosity prevailed. Something I had never seen before was within. A sincere apology. "I've had time to think about what I did," she wrote. "Seeing you create a life without our assistance has made me face some difficult realities about who I am as a mother. I envied your self-reliance and fortitude. The fact that you didn't appear to need me as much as I needed my own mother made me angry. I understand now, though, that you did require my help. Not in the ways I desired to be needed, though. You were reaching out when you asked us to look after the twins while you had surgery, and we totally let you down." The letter went on to say, "I sincerely apologize," and described how they had totally reorganized their finances. My father had accepted a part-time position at a hardware store in the area. For the first time in decades, they were living simply after selling the majority of their luxuries. She made no requests for cash or even pardon, just accepting her apologies. When I showed Jessica the letter, she seemed dubious. For weeks, they had been discussing writing to you. Dad initially opposed it, but following his cardiac scare last month, I believe he is beginning to change his mind as well. Fear of the heart? Despite my own fear, I asked. Only chest discomfort and elevated blood pressure. But he was afraid. Jessica clarified that he is now taking medicine and is genuinely according to the doctor's instructions. I believe that confronting his mortality has somewhat humbled him. I wasn't prepared to answer the letter right away. I needed time to think about how I felt. Was this an act of manipulation or sincere regret? Were they just changing their approach? Or had they really changed? For the first time since severing links, I glanced at old family pictures that evening. I noticed patterns behind the happy expressions that I had previously missed. My parents had always been actors, putting their own needs ahead of their own and pretending to be the ideal parents. A year following my operation, at last, I consented to meet my parents at a neutral setting, a peaceful cafe close to my new house. I hardly recognized them when they came. In some way, my father appeared smaller, his arrogant stance giving way to a more modest manner. Simple, functional clothing had replaced my mother's expensive clothing. Jessica spent the afternoon with the twins. A family reunion wasn't something I was prepared for yet. Before my father did something out of the ordinary, we sat in awkward silence. He sobbed. His voice breaking, he confessed, "I've been a terrible father and an even worse grandfather. I want you to know that I now see it, even though I don't expect your forgiveness. How self-centered we have been." My mother gestured toward my hand across the table, but she didn't actually touch it. "We've been in family therapy for months," she said. We initially objected to Jessica's concept, but it has since changed our lives. I didn't make unfulfilled promises or hasten to forgive them. Rather, I informed them about our new life and showed them photos of the twins. Perhaps for the first time in their lives, they listened without interjecting or making it about themselves. My father asked me softly as we were leaving if we would ever get to meet our grandkids. I gave this a lot of thought before responding. Your behavior, not your words, will determine that. If you truly want to improve, we can begin with brief visits under supervision. However, keep in mind that my kids will only interact with individuals that value their mother. As I left that meeting, I was free of the smoldering animosity and crushing weight of duty that had characterized our relationship for so long. Rather, I had a novel sensation, the composed confidence of a lady who had established limits and would enforce them without regret, who understood her value. It was unclear if my parents could actually change, but I had already turned from a kid seeking for acceptance into a mother strong in her protection and unambiguous in her demands. Story 3. When I was 6 months pregnant, my parents left me in the blazing desert. Go for a leisurely stroll and unwind. As the vehicle drove away, my sister giggled and I was left behind. It will be beneficial workout. They couldn't speak when they switched on the TV hours later, but her voice faded into the wind. The July heat in Arizona held onto the skin like a live thing. Melissa Williams looked out the window of her air-conditioned workplace and felt a little shift in her stomach. She stroked her tummy and smiled softly. "Good morning, little one." Her figure had transformed dramatically by the time she was 6 months pregnant. The most recent ultrasound picture and work paperwork were on her desk at the accounting business. Her first kid with Greg, her spouse. She recalled how every night they both sobbed when they saw the little limbs moving. In order to communicate with their unborn kid, Greg would put his palm on Melissa's abdomen. "How is the Lyman family's paperwork progressing?" Michael, her employer, yelled. "I'm only making one last check. In around half an hour, it should be finished." She considered having supper with her folks that night as she went back to work. For her, it was more than simply a family get-together. It was a little tribulation. Her parents are Robert and Charlotte Johnson, the social scene's biggest stars and real estate tycoons who are well known across the Phoenix suburbs. They seemed like the epitome of the ideal family from the outside. However, intricate hues were concealed behind the paint. Since her sister Vanessa had recently moved back home after getting divorced, things had gotten even more confusing. In contrast to Melissa, Vanessa had always been the favorite child. Vanessa left art school to live a glamorous life at the parties of the rich, while Melissa worked hard in college studying accounting and establishing her profession. After only 2 years, her lavish marriage to the heir of a real estate firm collapsed. The girl is very sentimental. Charlotte would frequently remark, "I have talent, but people always misunderstand me." Melissa would simply listen in silence each time. Melissa's mother appeared on the screen when her cell phone rang. "Melissa, the new dinner time for tonight is 7 o'clock. Despite Vanessa's yoga class being late, Mom, Greg, and I all changed our work schedules to start at 6 o'clock. You're always adaptable. Is Greg not preoccupied with his job? Anyhow, as usual?" Melissa inhaled deeply. "All right, at 7 we'll arrive. I will attempt to inform Greg." Exhausted, she sat back in her chair after hanging up. This was always the case. Vanessa's whims determined family decisions, and Melissa was always supposed to be the careless oldest daughter. Melissa parked her car in front of the Johnson home in the evening. After all, Greg had a crucial customer meeting that he couldn't postpone. As though addressing the unborn child inside her, she added, "I'm sorry, honey, but today I'll be strong enough for both of us." She opened the door. From inside, Vanessa's animated laughing was immediately audible. As she walked into the living room, she noticed Vanessa laughing with her father while relaxing on the sofa with her legs extended. "Melissa, you made it at last." Charlotte, her mother, came over holding a wine glass. "Oh my, haven't you filled out the form completely?" Melissa found it difficult to grin. "Mom, that's because I'm expecting." "Did you get the ensemble from a maternity store, Melissa?" Vanessa grimaced as she asked. "The alternatives provided are far more fashionable. Its usefulness is why I selected it. I can also wear it to work." "Well, I guess the looks also count." Her mom stepped in. "Bring Melissa something to drink, Robert." Robert, her father, got up and went to the bar counter. Even when you're 65. He had frightened counterparts in innumerable real estate transactions, and his aristocratic demeanor was typical of the guy. "Melissa, are you occupied at work?" As he handed her a non-alcoholic drink, her father inquired, "Yes, it's time for the quarterly close." "Work with you at all times." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "You won't be able to work as much when the kid is delivered. Do you have any concerns about that?" "Vanessa?" Melissa asked in a low voice. The air seemed to freeze for a second, but her mother swiftly brought up another topic. "Hey, how about this weekend we enjoy a picnic beside the Grand Canyon?" Melissa would like a change of pace, and the weather should be pleasant. That sounds fantastic. With excitement, Vanessa leaned forward. I purchased a brand new drone. We are able to capture breathtaking landscapes. This weekend is Greg's workday. Melissa started, but her dad cut her off. Greg never stops working. You ought to advise him to place a somewhat higher importance on family time. Melissa was about to protest when the dinner bell sounded, cutting her off. They spoke about nursery setup and baby names during the lunch. Although it appeared to be a nice family meal, Melissa could feel Vanessa's eyes on her many times. Melissa, I'm considering holding the picnic in the Grand Canyon on Saturday. Do you think that would work? Even though she wanted to say no, her mother brought it up again. Melissa nodded as usual when she saw Vanessa's demanding gaze and her parents' anxious faces. Indeed, it's okay. I'll be with you, Vanessa replied, with the baby, as she was walking away, gazing at Melissa's tummy. Aren't you the center of our parents' attention right now, Vanessa? After all, this isn't a competition. Vanessa gave a spooky smile. Melissa felt conflicted when she got up on Saturday morning. Greg had previously left a letter on her pillow before departing. If work ends early, I'll come get you. Be careful. I adore you. She inhaled deeply while holding the note to her chest. Melissa remarked, as though speaking to her child, It's going to be okay. It's just a family vacation. It will soon come to an end. Robert's opulent SUV pulled up in front of her flat an hour ahead of time. Vanessa waved from the back seat, while her father waved from the driver's seat. Charlotte, her mother, exited the passenger seat and gave Melissa a hug. It will be a beautiful day today. Despite her grin, Charlotte's eyes appeared to be focused on something else. Vanessa talked excitedly about her new drone and fashionable sunglasses in the drive. As they left the city, Melissa stared out the window, taking in the scenery of the Arizona outback. Reds and browns took the stage as the terrain progressively became drier. Where are we going, Dad? Melissa inquired. I take it that the Grand Canyon is still a long way off? Yes. However, there is a location with breathtaking views along the route. Through the rearview mirror, Robert grinned. A buddy of mine who works as a tour guide told me about this hidden location. I was unaware of that. Melissa started to feel uncomfortable. Big sister lacks an adventurous spirit. Vanessa let out a sigh. Everything must always go as planned. I'm expecting a child. Vanessa. Melissa shot back in silence. It's normal to feel some concern. The vehicle went onto a dirt lane after leaving the paved road. The landscape was speckled with parched vegetation and red granite mountains. There were no tourists in the area, so it was empty. Are you certain that this is correct? Melissa's worry was obvious. You worry too much, her mom stated. Robert is able to find the path. The automobile abruptly halted after another 20 minutes or so of traveling. The wide desert landscape was all that was present. Here we are, Robert made an enthusiastic announcement. From here, the vista is breathtaking. Melissa felt the bright sun as everyone exited the vehicle. The sun was scorching in June in Arizona. She lowered her hat and put it on again. Apply sunscreen. Look, we'll get an even better view if we climb that hill over there. Charlotte gestured toward a hill in the distance. The distance was at least 500 meters. We're going that far on foot. Melissa was taken aback. I'm in this heat and a little fatigued. Once more, here we go. Vanessa, who was often grumbling, rolled her eyes. The infant won't suffer any harm from a little walking. Melissa opened her mouth to reply, but she stopped when she noticed her parents' eager gaze. Okay, but I'm bringing water. She took a bottle out. The gang started to move. Melissa walked slowly, pausing now and then to rest. Vanessa and her parents proceeded, as if discussing something in private. Robert abruptly halted when they came to the center of the slope. I see now that I left the camera in the car. He gave him a forehead slap. Let's go back and get it, Charlotte. I will also attend. No, Vanessa answered hastily. You stay with Melissa. Charlotte gave the order. We'll be back shortly. As her parents hurried back down the hill, Melissa observed. Vanessa was sitting on a rock, staring at her phone with a disappointed expression. They promised to return immediately. Melissa saw that almost 20 minutes had gone by. Can you call Dad, Vanessa? Vanessa said apathetically. No signal. In addition, I have to go to the restroom. I'm returning to the vehicle. Hold on. Together, let's go. However, Vanessa had already begun to walk. Melissa let out a sigh and went slowly after. The desert had started to hurt her knees. Quiet. All of a sudden, she heard an engine. Melissa paused to listen. As the noise intensified, she quickly up the slope. Her heart froze from that position. In a cloud of dust, she could see the family SUV heading off. "What are you doing?" Melissa yelled and began to drop rapidly, but her pregnant frame was unable to keep up. Frightened and incredulous, she took out her cell phone. She seemed to be mocked by the no service display. As the automobile drew farther away, the passenger window opened at the last second, revealing Vanessa's face, borne by the wind. Melissa heard her voice, "Take a leisurely stroll." Melissa froze in desperation and halted. "It's a healthy workout." Vanessa's last words were lost in the breeze. The vehicle shrank to a tiny dot before vanishing beyond the horizon. Melissa fell to the ground, where she sat on the sand. This joke must be awful. Her voice was shaking as she whispered, "They will return shortly." However, an hour went by. After 2, there were no cars on the road. Her water bottle was half empty, and the sun was getting stronger. Melissa inhaled deeply in an attempt to calm herself. "Do not panic. Consider." She surveyed the area. The closest road appeared to be kilometers distant. It was extremely risky for her to walk back to civilization, especially when pregnant. She concluded that I would have to wait for assistance. There will be a visitor. However, she was aware of how impractical that was in this abandoned location. Nevertheless, she remained hopeful for both herself and her child. A miracle happened late in the afternoon. She noticed 2 individuals wearing trekking gear in the distance. Pulling herself together, Melissa got to her feet and signaled for assistance. The young couple over here saw Melissa and ran up to her. They seemed surprised and worried. "Are you all right?" the female inquired. A pregnant lady alone herself in such a setting. "I was abandoned," Melissa sobbed as she said, choking on her words. "My relatives." Without hesitation, the man took water out of his rucksack and gave it to Melissa. "Start with this drink. We'll contact the cops after that. This place has no signal." The man responded, "We have a satellite phone. We arrived equipped and ready for anything." When the rescuers heard Melissa's story, they were quite angry. The man pulled out his phone and started recording Melissa's surroundings. "Let's preserve this as proof," he replied softly. Legal repercussions are inevitable for those who commit such an atrocious act. With assistance from the pair, Melissa got to her feet. The rescue chopper was filled with tears of appreciation. A paramedic applied an oxygen mask on Melissa. Her skin was red from sunburn, and her lips were parched from the heat and dry air. She turned to thank Adam and Jessica, the pair who had saved her, through the vibrations of the chopper. "Are you okay?" Jessica inquired anxiously. "The infant?" Melissa gave a feeble nod. The paramedic gave a comforting grin. "The heartbeat of the fetus is steady. We'll send you to the hospital for an evaluation as soon as possible, but the dehydration hasn't gotten too bad yet. My spouse." Melissa choked her words. Adam answered, "We've already gotten in touch with him. When we phoned the police, they told him." In the outskirts of Phoenix, the chopper touched down on the roof of a general hospital. Melissa was moved on a stretcher right away as a medical crew waited. She saw a familiar shape hurrying toward her from the end of the hallway as she was being brought into the hospital. "Melissa?" Greg's words reverberated. Anger, relief, and dread twisted his expression. "Greg," she grasped her spouse's hand. "Are you all right? The infant?" He fought back and asked. She was now being examined by tears. The doctor stated that although your wife is very dehydrated and suffering from heat exhaustion, her life is not in jeopardy. We'll begin testing right away at 4 o'clock. Greg listened to the doctor's explanation while he held Melissa close to her bed. "I got a call from the cops. It seemed unbelievable to me that your parents would act in such a manner. Nobody can accept it." Melissa's eyes were weary as she gazed at her husband. "It's true, though. I was abandoned by them." Before she entered the examining room, Vanessa was giggling. 2 cops walked over to the bed. "We want to speak with you right now, Miss S. Williams. But how are you feeling?" "A little interview ought to be okay." About 5 minutes before to the examination, the doctor responded. With a nice grin, the female officer opened her notepad. "Let me first verify the facts for today. You and your sister and dad headed out for the Grand Canyon, right?" Melissa gave a feeble nod and went on to describe the specifics. Greg's expression slowly turned to rage. This proof is in our possession. A video that Adam and Jessica had submitted was shown by the other officer. It captures the circumstances of your abandonment, the vehicle's departure, and even the sounds of voices within the vehicle. The female officer continued, "We have verified the license plate number as well. An APB has already been issued. Additionally, officers have been sent to your parents' house." The door of the hospital room opened at that point, and a well-dressed woman with a tiny microphone came in. Channel 12 News' Carol Simons. "Melissa, about this terrible event. Leave now. This is a hospital room," said Greg as he got to his feet. The doctor groaned as the policeman led the reporter away. "I apologize. This incident appears to have been leaked." "What are you saying?" Melissa was perplexed. The emergency radio was most likely intercepted. The officer clarified that it is a significant scoop for them to learn that a pregnant woman was left in the desert by her family. Greg waited in the corridor for the assessment. He pulled out his smartphone and punched in a number. "It's Greg, Jason. I urgently need your legal counsel. It's an emergency, really. Melissa's sister and parents." He spoke softly as he described the circumstances. The journalists had already started to assemble outside the hospital in the meanwhile. The story of a pregnant lady abandoned in the desert quickly rose to the top of the local headlines. Robert, Charlotte, and Vanessa were seated in the living room of the Johnson estate. In an attempt to resume their regular lives, they showered as soon as they got home in the late afternoon. "Has Melissa gotten back to you?" Robert inquired, appearing a little nervous. Charlotte said as she flipped through a magazine. "Not yet. Greg probably went to get her." "How is she going to get in touch with anyone there?" Vanessa chuckled. "Cell service is unavailable. The prank could have gone too far." Looking out the window, Robert said. Vanessa remarked, "You're worrying too much, Dad. Doesn't Melissa always manage to find a way? In addition, there are visitors in the area. She will be found." "You're correct," Charlotte concurred. "She also constantly tries to get our attention. This time, we just gave her a small reality check. It's accurate." At last, Robert appeared to calm down. Sometimes, harsh love is required. Vanessa grabbed up the TV remote and sat back on the couch. "My favorite program is about to start." There was a local news show on when she switched the station. For the initial moments, the three of them were casually watching the TV when all of a sudden their faces went blank. "We do it again." On the outskirts of Phoenix, a pregnant woman's family has left her in the desert. The chamber echoed with the announcer's voice. The title "Breaking News, Pregnant Woman, Desert Abandonment Case" appeared on the screen, along with video of Melissa being hoisted from the rescue chopper onto a stretcher. God, oh God. Charlotte lost her grip on her magazine. Thankfully, a trekking couple found the victim and gave them the proper attention. According to sources, the pregnancy has not been seriously impacted, and Melissa Williams, the victim, is currently being examined at the hospital. They're displaying it. She informed the police about us. On the screen, Vanessa let out a scream. The video that Adam and Jessica shot included a scene of Vanessa leaning out of the car window and Melissa standing by herself in the desert as the car drove away. The breeze carried her voice. "Take a leisurely stroll. It's a healthy workout." The fact that the car's license plate was in plain sight was much more damaging. Police have said that they have already identified the culprits and are currently pursuing them. Serious criminal charges are expected to be brought against this heinous conduct. The room became quiet. Unable to speak, the three gazed at one another. Robert responded in a quivering voice that it was supposed to be a joke. "Melissa just learned a lesson." "That is untrue," Vanessa yelled abruptly. "All of this was planned by Mom and Dad." "No, I didn't. Keep silent." "Vanessa." The tone of Charlotte's voice was icy. "It was a joke. Melissa needs to be aware of it." The doorbell rang loudly at that time. The three could not move. They were frozen. The bell rung once more, louder and longer this time. On wobbly legs, Robert rose slowly and made his way to the door. Two policemen were waiting there when he opened it. "Robert Johnson, are you?" one of the officers inquired sharply. "Why, indeed. Are Vanessa and Charlotte Johnson present as well? What's this about?" "In addition to Melissa Williams' assault and desertion, We would like all three of you to visit the station. Robert was just about to speak. From behind, Vanessa's voice was heard. Mom and Dad are solely to blame. They had it planned. I had no knowledge. The policeman gave Vanessa a chilly stare. At the station outside the home, we'll talk about that. Neighbors gathered curiously as red and blue police lights flashed. As the three were loaded into the police vehicle, TV station vans had also pulled up, their cameras trained on the home. In embarrassment, Charlotte hid her face. But there was still no true regret in Vanessa's eyes, as though this was not quite real to her. It was only a small joke, she whispered. I never imagined it would become this bad. The Phoenix police station's interrogation chamber was a sterile, frigid place. Robert sat by himself, facing a table made of metal. He appeared to be an elderly guy with hunched shoulders, his once dignified physique now in ruins. I'll ask you again, Mr. Johnson. Detective Parker remarked coolly. You left your pregnant daughter in the desert, but why? It was supposed to be humorous. In order to teach Melissa a lesson, Robert was unable to look him in the eye. Parker's skepticism was evident in his voice. What sort of instruction was required for your expectant daughter? Robert stammered as he spoke, perspiration trickling down his brow. Her main concern is herself, especially now that she is pregnant. I understand. As he spoke, Parker took notes. Who came up with this then? Is it a joke? Robert stopped talking. Charlotte was confronted by female detective Morris in a separate questioning room. In all honesty, Vanessa came up with this concept. Charlotte's voice was shaking as she spoke. Vanessa has been resentful ever after our daughter became pregnant. So your younger daughter's envy led you and your spouse to accept a suggestion? Morris inquired icily. We weren't being serious. Charlotte started crying. We were going to return immediately, but those hikers spotted her first. Vanessa, seated on her chair in the third interrogation room, exhibited the most erratic responses. She experienced dramatic swings in her emotions, including anger, tears, and even laughter. What was the nature of your connection with your sister? Melissa was asked by Detective Richards. Vanessa gave a snort. She is flawless all the time, satisfies our parents' expectations every time. Completed college, landed a good career, met a kind husband, and now had a child. Were you envious? No. Vanessa's voice shot up. Just. She is constantly the center of attention, particularly after she became pregnant. All our parents speak about is her. How is Melissa's infant doing? We have to get Melissa's room ready. Tears ran down her cheeks as her voice cracked. I had no intention of hurting her. All I wanted to do was frighten her. Did you plan to just leave a pregnant woman in the blazing desert to frighten her? Richards posed the question incredulously. I assumed someone would immediately assist her. Vanessa let out a cry. In addition, Melissa always manages to solve problems. All I wanted was a little time in the hospital where my folks would notice me. Melissa was sleeping. Tests revealed that neither she nor the fetus were seriously impacted. Greg held her hand as he sat next to her. Greg whispered softly. I spoke with a lawyer, with the obvious evidence. There will undoubtedly be charges. You mean my family, Sue? Melissa's voice was full of nuanced feelings. Melissa, what they did was illegal. Greg spoke sternly yet politely. Our baby's life and yours were in jeopardy. Detective Parker went inside the hospital room after hearing a knock on the door. How do you feel? With worry, he inquired. Much better, Melissa said. Everyone in my family is being questioned. Parker took a seat. To be honest, this is a pretty severe issue. Assault on an expectant mother. Abandonment. There is a lot of interest from the state prosecutor. Prison term is a possible penalty. However, given their lack of familial ties and past histories, a suspended sentence is more plausible, Parker said slowly. But it's likely that a restraining order will be granted. Melissa gave a quiet nod. She felt a mixture of emotions, including loss, rage, and, oddly, a sense of satisfaction that the family's long-standing, skewed ties were now being fixed. Preliminary hearings started 1 week after the tragedy. Reporters crowded the courtroom, and the case of the desert pregnant woman's abandonment had become a national story. Melissa, her spouse, and their attorney came in. Vanessa and her parents were on the other side. Their stately look was vanished. All three were scared and worn out. Particularly, Vanessa had drawn harsh criticism on social media. The rescue couple's video and testimony were shown, along with her messy hair and dark bags under her eyes as proof. "Enjoy," says Vanessa's voice. The spectators gasped as the sound of a leisurely stroll reverberated throughout the courtroom. The communications discovered on Vanessa's smartphone during the inquiry were very startling. She had been suggesting reducing the amount of time spent reading these texts for 2 weeks before to the occurrence. There is no denying the premeditation. According to Prosecutor Anderson, this was a purposeful conduct motivated by jealousy and hatred rather than merely a jest. Jason, Melissa's attorney, got to his feet. "Due to the incalculable psychological anguish she has endured, my client was betrayed by her family and placed in imminent danger. She is still working toward rehabilitation, though. We request that she and her child's safety be given top priority during this experiment." The judge, taking into account how severe the situation is, decided on the trial timetable and set bail for the 3 accused. Numerous cancellation calls flooded Roberts' real estate firm. "We are not interested in doing business with your organization. If someone doesn't value family, we can't conduct business with them." Numerous patrons claimed that Charlotte's social club had suspended her membership due to her transgression of moral principles. All invites were withdrawn and she was shunned by old friends. Vanessa elicited the worst response. Thousands of deplorable remarks deluged her social media accounts, and her images were shared with the hashtags worst sister and pregnant woman abuser. Her divorce was also made public, and in an anonymous interview with an article, her ex-husband said that her egocentric nature was another issue in our marriage. Melissa, while recuperating at home, observed these happenings from a distance. Greg had rearranged his work hours to spend as much time as possible with her. "How do you feel about their current situation?" Greg inquired. "To be honest, I feel conflicted," Melissa replied, glancing out the window. "They cannot be forgiven for what they did. However, they remain my family, particularly my parents. However, they endanger you and our child. I am aware." Melissa put a hand on her abdomen. "For this child's sake, I must be strong and unaffected by previous familial ties in order to safeguard our new family. Emily." Melissa informed Greg of another choice that evening. "But not for retaliation," she answered forcefully. "I'll continue with the legal charges. It's for the child's protection and to save another person from experiencing the same situation, particularly considering that Vanessa is already getting more than enough societal punishment." Greg gave his wife a hug. "You are really powerful." "I must be." Melissa gave a quiet smile. "You are really powerful. I must be." Melissa gave a quiet smile. For this kid, 1.5 years went by. "Come to Mama, Emma." Melissa spread her arms out on the garden's lawn. The young girl smiled as she approached her. Greg watched his wife and kid with gentle care while seated in a garden chair. "She shares your strength," he grinned. "Yes, but you are the source of her tender heart." Melissa picked Emma up and gave her a gentle peck on the cheek. It was quiet in their new house. They had fled Phoenix following the event in search of a fresh start in another Arizona town. Melissa spent the rest of her time with Emma and only worked 3 days a week at an accounting business. It was a well-rounded existence. "I take it you're meeting Kate today?" Greg spoke those words. Melissa's therapist was Kate. She had been visiting her frequently since the tragedy in an attempt to mend her emotional scars. "She has been really helpful, yes," Melissa grinned. "I no longer feel as much grief when I think of them, especially these days. The trauma had taken a long time to heal." "The contract is prepared, Robert." Charlotte walked inside a little office. With a weary look on his face, her spouse sat at an ancient desk and studied paperwork. This little office was all that remained of their previously enormous real estate firm. The majority of their affluent clientele had departed, and those who stayed were either indifferent to the allegations or were not aware of them because of business ties. "Thank you." Robert gave a little nod. His back was bent, and his hair had gone white. The once queen of social circles, Charlotte now wore simple clothing and applied no cosmetics. Making new acquaintances was challenging, and her friends had deserted her. Google nonetheless returned stories about the desert pregnant lady abandonment case at the top of the results, despite the fact that their names were notorious in the area. "Vanessa, any news?" Robert inquired. "Only the phone call once a week." Charlotte let out a sigh. According to her, she is still unable to leave her residence. The most horrible circumstance was Vanessa's. She had sunk into melancholy, unable to bounce back from the shock of societal criticism. She struggled to find work and was entirely dependent on her parents for financial assistance. She depended on delivery services to get by, since she was afraid to step outdoors. The media had asked her for interviews on many occasions, but she had turned them down. The trial's outcomes were exactly what many had anticipated. Vanessa's parents were required to pay significant damages, and she was given a suspended sentence. All three were prohibited from approaching Melissa and her family by a restraining order. "Isn't Melissa's daughter now elderly?" quietly Charlotte inquired. "Are you familiar with pictures?" "No." Robert regrettably shook his head. "We have no right to see the face of our grandchild." Melissa was wheeling a trolley through the vegetable section of the grocery store. Emma sat in the cart's kid's seat and used her little hands to play with her mother's hair. "Are you a fan of broccoli?" Emma turned onto the next aisle and smiled in response to Melissa's question. She looked into the eyes of someone she knew. Vanessa was the one, pale, slender, and entirely devoid of her previous glitz. They both stood still for a minute. Tears filled Vanessa's eyes as they met Emma's. "Melissa." Her voice trembled as she said, "Vanessa." Melissa gently answered. "How are you?" she said after a lengthy pause. "Yes, I am," Vanessa stammered as she said. "Is she your daughter?" Melissa gave a nod. "Emma." Vanessa used a trembling palm to wipe her eyes. "She resembles you, indeed. I don't now," Melissa answered softly. "Emma is going with me." She flipped the card over and made her way to another heart-shaped aisle. She felt sympathy for her sister instead of resentment for the first time. When she informed Greg about the experience that evening, he inquired anxiously, "Are you okay?" "Yes," Melissa said, gazing out the window at the starry sky. "Oddly, I managed to stay composed." "She is shattered. Are you able to pardon her?" "It has nothing to do with forgiveness." Melissa looked at the bedroom of her daughter. "I'm going forward. They continue to be captives of the past." "That may be their worst penalty." She inhaled deeply. "My spouse and daughter are devoted to me. I discovered a true family. They were unable to take it away from me. Beyond the window, the stars and the new moon are visible. The night sky, the start of a fresh lunar cycle. A new cycle has also started in Melissa's life. She had become stronger as a result of her previous suffering and had discovered how to truly love her distant family. Her parents and Vanessa's days were filled with guilt as they considered what their horrible deeds had cost them forever.